Today's guest is someone who's rewriting the way we support women through one of the most identity-shifting experiences of their lives. And I'm talking about motherhood. Rachel Erasmus is a certified coach, former NHS midwife, and the founder of Full Spectrum Maternity Coaching. With over 2 decades of experience across clinical care, spiritual leadership, and organizational development, she helps women navigate the invisible shifts that come with becoming a mother. And she helps them reclaim their power along the way. From underserved communities to corporate boardrooms, Rachel's work bridges the emotional, professional, and systemic gaps that often go unspoken but are never unfelt. Please welcome Rachel Erasmus. How are you? I'm so happy that you're here. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did perfectly.
Okay, good. I didn't say it with the cool accent like you have, but
Well, I actually sound funny when I say it because it's actually an Afrikaans name. So everyone in South Africa kind of finds it quite amusing when I pronounce my own name.
Oh, that's funny. Interesting. Well, I'm so excited for this conversation today because, I know you're over in Europe and you guys are ahead of us when it comes to post post delivery care, but you're still seeing gaps over there. So I'm really interested to get your perspective and kind of see maybe what we need to do over here in the States as well to better support women. I'm a mom, you're a mom, so we both have experienced it firsthand and see it happening. So how did you get started in this line of work?
Oh, it's a long story, but essentially, I used to be a nurse and was trying to navigate my way about what was it that really mattered to me. And I ended up deciding that midwifery was where I wanted to focus, and actually natural childbirth and supporting women in a kind of very intimate way was the thing that really drew me. And I think that comparison you're speaking about with America and in Europe, certainly in England, I think the role of the midwife has been a really key element that's very different. It's a role that's held in law in the UK, whereas it doesn't have that same status or protection in other countries. And so I think that's really influenced how, certainly over the last several decades, people have been looked after in the UK when they're pregnant. So when I became a midwife, I joined St. Thomas's Foundation Trust in central London. And what was really interesting is they were just starting a way of caring for people at that point that was following mums the whole way through. So you get a midwife at booking when you were sort of 12 weeks pregnant, or maybe a little bit earlier.
Beginning.
And then you'd see them the whole way through. Obviously, if you're away on holiday, somebody else might visit them, but generally you're the same midwife all the way through. And then I'd be on call for labour and birth. And then I'd go and visit them postnatally as well. And we don't visit them as long as probably people really need, but certainly the first sort of 2 to 4 weeks, women get sort of touch points. And if things are going well, then they kind of get discharged 2 or 3 weeks.
Nice.
And then move on to like another sort of set of care from health visitors.
Nice. That's really interesting that you get to have kind of the same person throughout. Yes, we have our gynecologists and our OBGYNs here, and we have midwives here. We call them doulas a lot of times. Is it called doula over there as well?
There's also a doula, so that's separate to a midwife.
Okay.
Yes, we've got all three.
Okay. So, here in Texas, we are a little more used to using midwives and doulas than maybe other parts of the country, just because we have a lot of people who like the natural way of doing medicine and things like that. But I would say, in the country overall, we still do really have a real big gap in care for women. So I think that's really cool that you've got the same midwife pretty much the whole time. And then afterward as well.
That's the ideal. That's why the team was set up to do that. But the reality for most women in the UK as well is that they don't get that level of consistency.
Okay, so you're hoping to change that then and make that the norm.
That would be brilliant if there was enough staff.
Okay.
But certainly, I think the key for me around why that's important and why the role of the midwife was important was that the focus is on the woman. So the word midwife means with woman. And so it's actually, it's almost like a philosophical base. So the The obs and gynae kind of standpoint comes from a problem base, and something like risk management. Whereas actually the sort of essence of midwifery comes more from that sort of female connection to what is a normal process and a healthy normal process, and supporting that. And so there's obviously need for both, because, the process of pregnancy and birth isn't always straightforward, and there is maternal and neonatal death. So those things really do need to be handled really seamlessly, actually. But I think philosophically, to just go, actually, to get pregnant, to be pregnant, to give birth, to take care of a baby is something that is a natural and healthy and innate thing to do. How do we support women and support that process? And then there's a whole realm of other things that can come in to support that if needed.
I love that you say that. And, I know I chuckled earlier when you said that, essentially they don't always go as planned, the whole process. And that was my experience for certain, because I remember I thought I was going to have, I was very private and modest. And I thought, you know what, I don't want very many people in the delivery room. I want it, kind of low stress, just your run of the mill delivery. So I was about 29, 30 weeks, I think. Again, it's been a long time, so it's kind of hard to remember. But I do know it was 3 weeks before the girls were born. And it was during that ultrasound, they said, oh, surprise, there's two. And, and then I remember the doctor said, all right, you've got about 30 seconds to get over the fact that you're having two.
Wow.
We've got to talk about baby B. And so that's when they told me that she was substantially smaller, and the hole in her heart, and underdeveloped lungs, and missing brain parts. And, that they unloaded so much on me that it was very hard to process. And they still didn't even tell me the gender of either one. So I was still left going, I don't know. But, I remember it definitely did not go as planned. And it would have been wonderful to have somebody at that point who wasn't necessarily the doctor, but somebody who could have kind of held my hand through the whole thing as a woman, not, and of course, yes, there was family there, but I'm saying someone in the medical field. And then I remember my uh, delivery. Oh my goodness, it was quite chaotic. I went in for a standard stress test, and I the doctors here. I don't know how it is over there, but the doctors here guilted me into getting an amniocentesis. And I really didn't want to, because I was afraid of having the amniotic fluid leaking
Yeah.
as a result of the test. And the reason why they wanted the test was for twin transfusion. They wanted to check for that because they knew it was identical babies. And so with Sienna, the baby B being so small, they thought perhaps it's twin transfusion. So I'm not going to say they forced me, but they did guilt me into having the amniocentesis. And sure enough, the amniotic fluid leaked in. And so they said, okay, well, you've got to come back in an hour and have babies. And, they were 6 weeks premature. So I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah.
And so there were 13 people in the delivery room, the 2 carts. And I remember, they just quickly showed the babies to me like, hello, here's your kid. Okay. And off. So it was very chaotic. I mean, fairly traumatic, I guess. But yeah, it would have been nice, I think, to have the same person there. And then even afterward, coming, those few weeks afterward, because definitely it was not ideal. And I know I have other people in my life who have had surprise troubled births, and, things that were not found in utero, and they've really been thrown for a loop. So I think what you do and what you're trying to do to bridge that gap is so amazing. And the reason why I thought it would be good for this podcast called Finally Seen is because I know so many women don't feel seen in their journeys, their pregnancy journeys, and especially afterward, because a lot of people think you're going to have this perfect bundle of joy with no medical issues and everything's going to go smoothly. Breastfeeding's going to be a breeze. And, you just think that that's what's going to happen. And so many women, that's not the case, and they just don't feel seen afterwards. So, I
There's
guess,
so many things you've touched on in that. there's so many areas, but it makes so much sense what you're speaking about.
well, and, I guess when it comes to what you're seeing women specifically ask for, what is it, an area where they are saying, hey, I am not feeling seen here. I really need support.
I almost feel like I want to answer in a slightly wider way, if that's all right. Um, so I think if I just go back to some of the things that you were speaking about just now, you were speaking about the speed at which things were changing for you. So, you go into a scan and you suddenly hear not only have you got twins, but you've got a whole lot of complications to actually have to deal with you never even thought were there, and you didn't know even the gender by the end of it. So there's a huge amount to digest in a really short space of time, and how that's handled will vary doctor to doctor, midwife to midwife, situation to situation. But the reality is you got a lot of information in a really short space of time that changes your life.
Dramatically.
Hugely. And it's how do you process that, and where do you go to process that? And do you have the tools and the capacity to process that in a way that is supportive and healthy for you? And that's what women are experiencing on all levels. Like, it could be the labour's going really, really well, but at the very last minute, the waters break and there's meconium, which is the poo, the baby's first poo in the womb. And usually that ends up being handled in a much more medicalised way rather than leaving things to happen naturally. There are some concerns that can happen with that, but that changes everything. And that's a very short window of, a few minutes, and suddenly the whole thing's changed and they're in a different situation. And you spoke about sort of modesty and things, and suddenly all of that's gone. And,
Oh, yeah.
and it's like that sense. And for many people, it's like, I just feel violated, or I can't catch up with what's just taken place. And so having the opportunity, whether it's with somebody who was part of that experience or somebody that understands something of that process, but also has some ability to kind of engage with, well, how are you interpreting that? What's the meaning you're putting on that? What are the feelings that are there? How do you kind of not avoid it and block it? Because I think for many people, it's such a shocking, intense, and as you mentioned, the word traumatic for some people experience, that you just block it. And it's like, let's just not go there. The baby's here. It's intense enough with a newborn baby. Let's ignore that period of life. And then when you get pregnant again, which many people do, it's suddenly like, oh, okay, now I've got to face that. And I don't want it to be the same. So there's a need to kind of journey it in a healthy and really constructive way.
I think, of course, we had people at church and friends and family, but I think maybe having someone on the medical side who could have come in and supported the emotional side as well would have been really helpful, because, I was very young, and that's a lot to process at a young age. And, also knowing that these particular things they were bringing up were literally life changing, that will, and I remember we did have one nurse practitioner who came to check on Sienna once she finally did come home. She was in the NICU for 108 days, but she came, and I don't know what I said that prompted her to say this. And when I have told people that she said this to me, I get mixed reactions, but it was what I needed to hear. She told me, well, not every baby is a Gerber baby. And so the mixed reactions I get from that are, well, all babies are perfect, the standard. But it's like, I needed, I guess, that acknowledgement that, yes, she's wonderfully made just as she is, but she also comes with certain considerations, and it's okay that you are blown away by that and confused by that and not sure how to handle that. So, it was a well-received message for me at the time, and it was super helpful.
Tired of overpriced energy drinks full of junk? Same. That's why I use Babello, a self-carbonating hydration packet that gives you clean energy, electrolytes, and vitamins without the crash. Just add water, shake, and sip. It's way more affordable than typical energy drinks and way better for you. Use code ChrissyBernal15 at checkout to get 15% off at drinkbabello.com. Hydration just got an upgrade.
Let's talk about the pilot program that you started and tell me about what that was and how that went.
Yeah, so even in the context of being in the UK, where there, was an effort to do continuity of care for women, and our model in our team was probably the optimal model, or as close as you could get to it, which it wasn't reflected all through the country and even all through our trust. I kept seeing the same sort of pattern coming up a lot with women that I was looking after. And I was in central London, so there was a mixture of people that I looked after. Some were kind of younger women who had really strong family networks locally. And then there was a lot of professional women that had moved in, maybe stayed in from university, moved for jobs in London, didn't have a network of family, social friends, but not necessarily friends who are at the same point on the journey of having families. And so they would often work right up to the last minute that they could at work because it's highly pressurized. They want the maximum time off with the child afterwards. And we do get really good maternity leave here in comparison to many other countries in the world.
Yeah.
But it could still do with improving, but it's certainly a lot more time. And so they would work really hard, really long, be very capable and competent in their roles, but then come home with the baby. Because in the UK, actually, if you've had a normal birth with no complications, you can come home the next day.
Oh, wow.
So you literally, that quick turnaround of like, oh, I was pregnant and now I've got a child to look after 24/7 is really, really immediate. And even within a cesarean section, you're still looking at sort of 2 to 3 days afterwards to come home.
Yeah, I think they sent me home 3 days afterward.
Yeah. With two.
Well, with one.
One actually, yes, because one was still.
Actually, Sierra stayed in the NICU for 2 weeks, so I went home without any babies.
Okay, so that's something in itself.
Yeah.
To kind of go, okay, what's that experience like?
Yeah. So actually, like you said, I didn't even remember that until just then I blocked it out, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. There's so much that happens. Life is moving so fast and there's so much demanded. It's hard to create those sort of spaces.
Yeah.
But the mums so there was a lot of mums who, were very capable, very competent, but then would come home with a baby. And because obviously the journey changes all the time with a newborn baby, but those first few days, for many babies, they're feeding hourly. And that's normal. There's nothing wrong. But the experience of living through that, you just can't know it until you've lived through it. It just means nothing. And then you don't know if you're settling the baby well. You may not, many of these women haven't had much experience with children. So it's this kind of brand new experience that's incredibly intense, a lot demanded of them. Some were trying to follow a very rigid sort of feeding regime or sleep regime. And for some babies, that'll work, but for most it won't. That's not what their instinct is. And so you've got babies that become very fractious, parents that become really anxious. And alongside all of that is a whole load of self-judgment, self-demands, guilt, pressure. And there's no real let out for it because you're constantly needing to be doing something that you've never done before for somebody you don't really know how to look after.
Yeah.
And it was just these kind of crises. And also you've got your hormones, are going through a whole big shift. Milk's coming in, whether you're feeding or not, you still get, engorgement often and heat. And I think I just realized how hard people were finding it. And I just thought, people don't get an insight into that space because usually people are in their little bubble with whatever support network they've got for those early days, sort of manage to survive it somehow. And then on the day that they feel at their best, they might, visit somebody or, and so everyone's got this like false impression that everyone else is coping quite well with life really. And they're the only one that's really struggling and they don't know what they're doing. But I was getting to see this like every day, and it's like, oh, okay, this is just the norm. And I just thought, most of these women, they don't have any problems in terms of like mental health problems or, capacity in just as human beings, but they just need another level of support that isn't the functional support. So as midwives going in, we would check the weight, we would check how many times the baby was pooing and weeing, how the feeding's going. And if you had enough time or you were that way inclined, you would offer more emotional support. But that kind of came lower down on the list because of the number of women that you're visiting and how fast you often need to move through things. And I just thought women just need a space to know that what they're going through is normal and that they're doing okay, and to really understand themselves actually, and to acknowledge themselves and to recognize what they're going through, and that they're really achieving a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in several twin groups on Facebook, and I see a lot of these new moms posting. Some will post anonymously, but I see so many of them saying, I just want to run away, or I can't do this, or, and it just makes me so sad for them to think that they are failing, or, that they're not going to be able to love their children, or because they don't feel it right away, or something like that. And they feel like that's not normal. So they must be a bad mom. So I'm sure you've experienced some of that with women.
And certainly if those things are running for people, because that is the case, not everybody feels that level of connection or those overwhelming feelings for their baby initially. So if you've got a mum that has maybe had a difficult experience at birth, isn't feeling deeply connected to their child, but then every single person that they come across goes, oh, your child's wonderful. You must be so happy. Congratulations. It's great. And they're like, yes, of course I am. Of course I am. The discrepancy gets wider and wider. And then the sort of internal talk that they have to themselves is even worse. And so it's kind of going compassionately to that person and helping her see herself and hear herself and just care for herself and just go, actually, it's okay. And then actually that opens up a lot more space to have the connection that she probably longs to have with her baby and will come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were talking about women who were working and feeling that the need to, grind as long as possible. And I know that we experience that a lot over here, women trying to work. I mean, shoot, not long ago, there was a weather person. She went into labor, her water broke on the air while she was giving, the weather report. So, we definitely push it over here as well. But let's talk about how you support them when they try to re-enter the workforce, because I know that in itself is a completely different animal.
Yeah. So most of the work that I've done with women going back into the workplace has been one-on-one. And it's been very much led by the specifics that they're noticing for them at the time. But a lot of common things that come up are practical things. So there's, starting to have to think about childcare, that maybe they've been the full-time carer for the baby for the period they've been off work. And it's, who do they trust their child to? How do they cope with not being present? How are they going to cope when the baby's crying when they leave them? How do they hold themselves? The guilt that often will come with that. So there's that sort of exploration of who the child gets looked after by, but how do they hold themselves and their relationship to the baby in that context? And then it's also, going back into a workspace where, depending on how long they've been away from, it can affect, how confident they're feeling going back. But actually, they're not going back the same person that they left.
Mm.
So, and this is why I think it's really important that women are supported through the process of leaving work, birth, postnatally, and returning to work, because life has shifted immensely. Their priorities, their responsibilities, their view of themselves. And if women are left to a place where they have a traumatic experience through the birthing process, they're left feeling incompetent and incapable in those early days as a mum. They kind of find their way through. They coming back to work feeling really inadequate. And I mean, these are massive generalizations. So obviously individuals can have different abilities to process that. But you're coming in on the back foot and back into an environment that's continued to move at the same pace that it moved before, continuing to expect arrival, the same hours of the day, the same level of commitment, the same priorities. And actually, women aren't always feeling that at the time that they go back. And it can be really hard to try and prove, oh, yes, I am still enough, because actually in themselves, they're not feeling like they are. So actually, if along the journey, there's that recognition that what they're journeying is transformative, it is changing them, but it's adding to them, that there's actually new muscles, new qualities, new strengths, new abilities that are being added to the person that they were and all that they already had, then you've got like this much fuller, richer space to come back into an environment that you're familiar with, to go, do you know what? I am going to have some different boundaries here. There are going to be some things I can do and some things I can't do, but actually who I am and what I contribute is of really great value. And then it opens up the nature of the conversations then to have the confidence with line managers to say, actually, these are the things that I'm going to need. What can you meet me with? But I think one of the other things that goes on in the background as well is that different work environments also are very supportive or unsupportive of women who have babies. So there can be, certainly in this country, some anxiety about taking long periods off in case their job's not there for them, or, they're getting sort of marginalised in some way. And so although that's going to be very individual, and in this specific environment, there is a need to have support alongside that to go, well, okay, so what is showing up here? What needs to be brought forward in your sort of authority and in your sort of strength to put that forward? So there's a lot. Women are dealing with a lot, and if you're talking about, I don't know, what is the maternity kind of leave typically in America?
Typically 6 weeks here.
Okay. So in the UK, it would be more common for people to take about 6 months to a year.
Wow.
It's not all paid. Usually you might get about 3 months pay, depending on the work environment. Then you get maybe another few months half pay or partial pay. And then it would be quite a small amount from the government. But there's a much bigger space. So obviously for women in the UK that have been off work for a year, in terms of confidence, re-entry, that's a really big chunk of time actually to be out of practice of the things that you were doing. But then you've got different challenges with a 6-week-old baby to walk back into the work environment.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, so I had the girls during winter break at college, which I'll call university. And I remember taking Sierra to class with me sometimes. Sienna was still in the NICU. So I would take Sierra to class with me. And I just carried on because, well, one, I think my coping mechanism was to just dive back into, working or normal, but I just jumped right back in. And you said something about thinking about childcare and whatnot. And, over here, childcare is very expensive. And especially once, you only get those 6 weeks. So now you've got to find daycare or childcare for a 6-week-old baby, which is usually really expensive. It's often the same as a mortgage or close to.
Wow.
And just recently we had a mother who, and it made me so frustrated and sad for her. She, I'm assuming, didn't have anywhere for her child to go while she went to work, and she left her in the car and she died because of the heat. And, it just made me so sad for her that she felt like that was her only option.
Yeah.
And so, when you said that about childcare, it's like, I see such a need for people to just understand their options, or for workplaces to try and figure out some options. I mean, over here, like even some of our high schools over here have childcare. We have many of our office buildings that have childcare on site. So there are some companies who are starting to figure out, like, okay, women are making these huge contributions. We need to make it easier on them to come back and do this. Because, like you said, there are new skills that come and even that you learn from being a mom. And I think specifically, I have a lot of skills that I don't know if I would have had if I didn't have the girls, twins, course, because now I can juggle.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, it's funny when I go to the grocery store and I'll have several bags and they'll say, "Oh, do you need help?" I'm like, I had twins. This is nothing. But it also, like some of my soft skills, having Sienna as a special needs, baby and now a young adult, I have learned to figure out what her communication style, which then translates into my ability to figure out other people's communication styles. And I'm much more patient than I think I would have been. And I can meet people where they are more so than I think I could have based on who I was and I was always pretty patient. I guess my parents might say otherwise, but um, but I was, I led our special needs Sunday school, so I always had a heart for people who were, not given the same deck of cards that I was. But so yeah, I love that you say that she's changed immensely once she's gone back to work, but that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems ridiculous to me. I'm not a decision maker or a CEO or leading a company in that way, but like, why would you make it difficult for women to be there? Because these women have got many years of experience and all these added skills and qualities. So you've got really great staff. And then you've got to pay a whole load of money if they're not coming back to work to recruit new people who don't have the same understanding and insight into the company and don't have the same history and experience to bring. It's like, it just doesn't make sense to me why these barriers would be there. But it's, as you say, sometimes it's just not the consideration, just not awareness of actually what the real needs are. And, certainly I'm aware in the UK, there's more and more women's voices coming out just saying, look, we're talking about inclusivity. This is just a really basic sort of thing to give consideration to as humans.
Yeah, and I think too that as people are starting to realize just how well businesses run when they do include women in them. And just, over here, especially, I have seen the data that supports that women-led companies are kicking it. Like they are just killing it over here. And when we make investments, a lot of times our investments do better. So, I think people are starting to wake up to, oh wait, they're approaching things a little differently and it works. Let's see how we can blend these two. So I love that over there as well, the women are starting to say, hey, let's figure this out. Let's change some things. Because you're right. The cost of turnover for hiring and training and that lag and then figuring out the company culture and how it flows there is so much more expensive than just sticking in a daycare or, finding a different solution.
Like flexible working, being able to work remotely, being able to adapt like the set times of hours and not having to do specific 9 to 5, because you're not dealing only with babies, you're dealing with parents actually who then have children who have to be dropped off at school and picked up from school. So that ability to sort of flex to get the most out of your staff and to value your staff is so important.
No, and you're right. And I understand that not every position can be remote. Obviously, you have to go to one on occasion. There are some where you have to do something like that lady that I mentioned. Unfortunately, her child died in the car. Clearly she had a job that she had to show up at. But, I think whenever possible, we should try and find ways to make it so that's flexible. That's been a really important aspect of the culture we built here at Be a Better Brand, because I have worked remote for most of my career because of Sienna. I started out in a physical location, but I would often have to call in because either Sienna was sick again, or she needed another surgery, or she was having a meltdown and, I needed to go handle it, or, it was always something. So I was not that I was afraid of getting fired, because I had a wonderful boss at the time. He thankfully had 7 children, so he understood how it worked. But it made me feel bad that I constantly had to call in and I felt like I wasn't doing my part, even though I was, but it's just like you said, that inner dialogue, that guilt. And so I had to quit and figured out a way to work from home, contributing from home myself. So, thankfully, when the pandemic happened, I was already set for going remote. But,
Yeah.
Everyone on our team knows that if you've got to go pick your kid up, go pick your kid up. If your kid has a play at school, go to the play. You're an adult. I know you'll get your work done on time when you can. So that's been very important to me to set up, because I wish that would have been an option for me, and that I didn't have to try and make my own job early on. So, and I know we have a lot more remote options now than 20 something years ago, but I love that you're supporting women who are in these professional positions where they might have to go into the office and all the anxiety that's around that. If you could, your initial program that you did, if you could redesign that now with full autonomy, how would you have redesigned it?
Well, actually, I did redesign. Redesign it. So I didn't actually answer that question earlier. So when I was working as a midwife in London, I got some funding from a charity to run postnatal coaching groups for mums who were 2 weeks to 3 months postnatal. And that was a really rich and wonderful experience. And it was in person. And the focus really was about a lot to do with their identity and to handling their sort of inner dialogue and sort of getting to acknowledge who they were and what they were becoming, with some sort of visioning around who it is they want to be and where they want to go. And when I had my daughter, I stopped working for a few years and then thought, actually, I want to see if I can redesign that, because I've moved, I'm in a different situation. I can't show up physically in London in the same way that I did then. So I've now changed it to an online offering. And I was just thinking, is this still going to be as effective? Is it going to have the same level of connection and depth that's possible that we had in person? And we've recently been running those, and actually it's been really incredible to see the insight, the awareness, the growth, the connection between mums. I think one thing that I really love about these kind of group setups is that there's an ability for people to speak really, really freely, really honestly about their experience, without judgment, without layers of opinion being put in and solutions and how it should be, but just getting to really be seen.
Yeah, none of the shoulds on you.
Sorry, I missed what you said then.
I said none of the shoulds on you. You should be doing this. You should.
Exactly. Just getting to be seen and be heard. And what I'm often doing in that is I'll help them through some tools to actually sort of figure things out for themselves, but also give some sort of feedback and sort of interact with what's going on. And the other mums, you can see them sort of going, oh yeah, that's not the same situation that I'm in, but that really makes sense for me. And, just this sort of recognition amongst the sort of group, the ripple of, yeah, I get that. Oh, that's really insightful. Or that's really helpful. Or I didn't mention that, but that's what I'm facing into. And it's not that common you get the sort of level of honest conversation and sort of facilitated conversation. So I think that's a really special quality of mums getting together in a group context.
How many do you typically have in the group?
Small. So I don't want more than 8 women in a group. So it can be anywhere between sort of 4 and 8. I think 6 is my kind of ideal number.
That's your sweet spot right there.
Yeah, I think it's intimate, and I found that's the same in person and online. It's because it's vulnerable. I think it's not easy to speak into what's real when you don't often face into it yourself. And then to do that in amongst a group, and often there can be emotion that's present with that as well, and to allow that to be present and sort of be with it, it takes courage and it takes vulnerability. And a large group, it's a very, very different dynamic.
Well, and I like that you're keeping it, large enough so that you can hear from other people's experiences, but small enough to where they feel safer to actually express themselves. But, I've been in coaching sessions before where there is about that same amount of people, and you might not understand what you're going through until somebody else says what they're going through. And then you're like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you're doing that up beyond the one-on-one. And I know you come from a CTI background, and I had Christy Mann on the podcast as well. And I've worked with coactive coaches for, I guess, almost 10 years now. So I've been in the sphere for quite a while. And I love the particular model that y'all use and the coactive part of it. So explain a little bit about your coaching style, and because I guess I want to be able to demonstrate that your kind of coaching is legit coaching. It's not,
Yeah.
like you didn't just decide to slap a label of coaching on yourself.
Yeah.
You're like Major League Baseball coach, highest higher level of coach that you could get. So explain to me your style of coaching.
Yeah. Well, I guess in a way that because CTI coactive coaching is where I did my training, it kind of almost tells you it in the in the title, because it's co and active. So the co is about a partnership, and it's about connection, it's about humanity, it's about being, it's how we show up, who we are, what our qualities are, our values, our essence, how we choose to be. And then the active is actually this stuff to do, this stuff to get done, this stuff we want to create, there's things we need to engage with. And it's like, what actual actions are we going to take to achieve that? And so every session, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's group stuff, there's this sort of element of both of those things being present. So there's always some sort of momentum and some movement, but it's not from just a cerebral level, and it's not a false positive kind of thing. It's a real honest check in with my whole self, my body, my emotions, my beliefs, my attitudes. It's like, what is here? What needs to be let go of? What needs to be brought forward? And now, what do I choose? What do I do? And when I actually heard about the coactive model, I loved it, because there's a whole sort of system around principles and pillars and values that are all part of this approach to coaching. But one of them is dancing in the moment. And I realized that for me as a human, I have absolutely loved dancing myself. And it's a way that I really connect to my whole self. But there is this sense of intuitiveness and being able to be sensitive to what is present in a moment. And then how do you move and respond to the music? How do you move and respond to what you're picking up? And that is something that personally I love in the coaching situation. And when I ran some groups recently, I had some coaching before it. And one of the things that came up for me was listen to the music. And it was like I sat there in the room and I thought, I don't know what's going to come up here. I don't know what someone's going to say. I don't know what their issues are going to be. I don't know, what's going to be difficult, what's going to be easy, what's going to open up. But I'm going to listen to the music and I'm going to respond to that and be adaptive and just be with what's present and create from that.
I love that. Yeah, I've noticed that. And I guess now I know why so many of the coactive coaches dance a lot. Well, now I know why. But I know that you said you've got this group program. Do you do it like ongoing, or do you have like certain cohorts, or how does that work?
Yeah. So antenatally, I'm piloting a new program, which is just 3 sessions. Knowing that people are very time scarce before they have the baby. But those ones, they're 3 2-hour sessions online. And the focus of that is a different focus each time, but it's to do with the identity shift that's taking place and a letting go of what was. And then stepping into recognizing the unknownness of giving birth, that whatever the plans are, whatever the process you think is going to happen. You don't know. And it's like, how do you engage with that in a way that reduces the amount of emotional trauma that you might experience for things not being the way that you anticipate, and just being able to enjoy what's there as well. And then the third session's more focused on the connection with the baby, and being really conscious around that, because again, we can drop on ourselves and we can also drop on the baby. It's like an idea rather than a real like, oh my gosh, actually, I'm about to meet you. Like, who are you? How do I want to be in relation to you? So that I'm trialing at the moment. And then the postnatal is done in cohorts. So I've got there's 6 weeks, and we do weekly sessions, and they're 2 hours each. In fact, this morning I just did a follow-up with the first cohort that I did. So we just did a 2-hour check-in 3 months after one of the cohorts. And
what was the result?
Oh, it was really lovely to see them. And I think the level of openness that was there was incredible. It was interesting to hear and see how much life changes even over a few months with a newborn. It's a different world a few months down the line, and there's some just natural processes that have shifted and changed and opened up. But what they did speak into was how they saw themselves and how they held themselves had really shifted from the first sort of work that we'd done together. The communication with partners, the way that they saw themselves was really important. And yeah, so we're just kind of exploring with that at the moment.
That's neat. I like that. I like how you're addressing the both the identity shift and the relationship with the child, especially if there is those situations where it's like, oh, that's not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And that's even something that I've learned as the kids have become adults. And maybe I was able to do this because it wasn't what I expected whenever I gave birth. But, I've even learned as adults that the children are not necessarily going to be what I envisioned, and that's okay. And not that there's anything wrong with my kids are fantastic, but um, it's like, if a kid doesn't go to college or doesn't go to university, that's okay. Like, you've got to be okay with not putting your vision on what it's going to be necessarily. Because yeah, right. Some of these babies are super colicky. They have food allergies, or just so many things that just don't go as planned. How can people find out about your cohorts or one-on-ones or anything like that?
So I've got a website, which is rachelerasmus.com.
Okay.
I've also I'm on LinkedIn. I'm establishing my my other social media channels. They haven't quite got up and running yet. But yeah, my website's probably the main thing, and you can link on to courses through that.
We'll be sure to put that in the show notes then. This has been really, really wonderful. Is there something that maybe we haven't touched on that you would really like for that mom out there to hear who maybe is feeling unseen in her journey of motherhood?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to take a pause, and to, even if you just sit for a second and just breathe and notice yourself and notice what you feel, and just let yourself know that you're doing okay. I think that's the thing. We get so caught up with being out there for the babies and out there for everyone else, and what gets dropped is us. And in the first instance, we need to be able to see ourselves and just hold ourselves and just let ourselves know we're doing okay.
I love that. I definitely love that. Well, Rachel, I have really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm so thankful that you came on to have this discussion with me. I'm sure it's going to at least help one person out there for sure, but I'm sure it will actually spawn more questions too. And I'm eager to see kind of the feedback and what other topics people want us to carry and cover around this. But again, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure having you. And I look forward to seeing the audience next week on Finally Seen.
Thank you, Chrissy.